The massive gates of the Galactic Military Academy gleamed under the twin suns of Nexus Prime. Cadet Maya Chen stepped off the transport shuttle, her worn military boots hitting the polished metal platform with a soft thud. Around her, alien cadets from dozens of species moved in groups, their advanced weapons and armor glinting in the sunlight. Maya carried only a simple backpack and wore the basic academy uniform. No plasma rifles, no energy shields, no gravity manipulators like the others. Her hands were empty and she preferred it that way. A towering Krathan cadet, his 6 arms bristling with various weapons, noticed her first. "Look at the human," he rumbled to his companions, his voice like grinding stone. "She brings nothing. How does she expect to survive combat training?" The other cadets turned to look. There was Zeph, a crystalline being whose body could generate electromagnetic pulses. Vox, a gas-based life form contained in an advanced mechanical suit equipped with chemical dispersal systems. And Kira, a feline species whose natural speed was enhanced by cybernetic leg implants. "Maybe humans are so primitive they don't know about weapons," Zeph chimed, his voice tinkling like breaking glass. "I heard their home planet barely has space travel." Maya ignored the whispers and stares. She had heard it all before during the selection process. Earth was indeed one of the newer species to join the Galactic Coalition, and humans were often seen as the least technologically advanced race in the Academy. Most instructors expected them to fail within the first month. The orientation hall was enormous, designed to accommodate species ranging from tiny insectoids to massive gas giants in containment suits. Commander Thakron, a reptilian veteran with scars covering his scaled face, stood at the podium. His 3 eyes surveyed the assembled cadets with cold calculation. "Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy." His voice boomed through universal translators. "You represent the finest warriors from across the galaxy. Over the next 4 years you will learn to fight as one unit, defending the Coalition against threats both known and unknown." He paused, his middle eye focusing on different sections of the crowd. "But first you must survive. 60% of you will not graduate. The weak, the unprepared, and the foolish will be eliminated." Maya felt the weight of stares upon her again. She stood straighter, meeting the commander's gaze when it fell upon her. "Your first test begins now," Thakron announced. "Combat simulation. You will be divided into squads of 6 and face various scenarios. Your performance will determine your class ranking and training groups." The cadets were quickly sorted into mixed species squads. Maya found herself grouped with the same aliens who had mocked her earlier. Krathan Yorak, the 6-armed giant, Zeph, the crystal being, Vox in his mechanical suit, Kira, the enhanced feline, and Nex, a floating jellyfish-like creature that communicated through bioluminescent patterns. "Great," Jorak muttered, his lower arms checking his plasma cannons while his upper arms adjusted his armor. "We get the human with no equipment. This will bring down our squad rating." The simulation chamber was a vast room that could reshape itself into any environment. As the squad entered, the walls shimmered and transformed into a desert landscape under a harsh red sun. Sand dunes stretched in every direction, broken only by jagged rock formations. "Scenario initiated," announced the computer's voice. "Hostile forces detected. Mission objective: eliminate all threats and secure the outpost location." Immediately, the other cadets took defensive positions. Jorak's plasma cannons hummed to life. Zeph positioned himself on a rock outcropping where his electromagnetic abilities would have maximum range. Vox began analyzing the air for chemical signatures. Kira crouched low, her cybernetic legs ready to spring into action. Nex floated above them, his bioluminescent patches scanning for movement patterns. Maya simply knelt down and placed her bare hands on the sand. "What is the human doing?" Nex's translated voice buzzed with confusion. "This is not the time for meditation." "Maybe she's paralyzed with fear," Kira suggested, her tail twitching with impatience. The first wave of enemy drones appeared on the horizon, their sleek forms cutting through the air with deadly precision. The squad opened fire immediately. Plasma bolts and electromagnetic pulses filled the air. Vox released a cloud of corrosive gas that dissolved 2 drones instantly. Kira leapt between rock formations with incredible speed, using the terrain for cover. But Maya remained motionless, her eyes closed, her hands pressed firmly against the warm sand. The other cadets had to adjust their positions to protect her, thinking she was frozen in terror. "We cannot protect a liability," Jorak shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "Human, move or be eliminated." More drones approached, these ones larger and more heavily armed. The squad's initial enthusiasm began to fade as their weapons started to overheat and their energy reserves depleted. Advanced as their technology was, sustained combat was draining their resources quickly. "Ammunition low," Vox reported, his mechanical voice strained. "Chemical reserves at 30%. My electromagnetic field is weakening," Zeph added, his crystalline body dimming slightly. Maya's eyes snapped open. She stood slowly, sand falling from her palms. Around her, the desert battlefield had become a chaotic mess of smoking drone wreckage and exhausted cadets. The final wave of enemies was approaching, and they were the largest yet. "Now what, human?" Jorak demanded, two of his arms reloading while the other four kept firing. "Will you run?" Maya smiled and raised her empty hands toward the approaching drones. "I don't run," she said quietly. "And I don't need weapons." She pressed her palms together and then spread them apart. What happened next would change everything the alien cadets thought they knew about humans and their capabilities. The sand around Maya began to move, swirling upward in defiance of gravity, forming patterns that seemed impossible under the laws of physics as the aliens understood them. The approaching drones suddenly found themselves flying into something that shouldn't have existed, something that would make the other cadets question everything they thought they knew about the primitive human race. Maya's empty hands were about to become the most dangerous weapons on the battlefield, and the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most advanced technology couldn't compete with something far more ancient and mysterious. The sand rose around Maya like a living thing, defying gravity and reason. Tiny grains swirled upward in perfect spirals, creating patterns that hurt the alien cadets' minds to look at directly. The approaching drones, confident in their superior technology, flew straight into what appeared to be a harmless dust cloud. What happened next made Jorak's 6 arms freeze in mid-reload. The sand ignited. Not burned, not heated, but ignited into pure plasma fire that consumed the drones instantly. The metal melted like ice under a blowtorch, and the advanced electronics simply ceased to exist. Where 12 heavily armed combat drones had been flying moments before, there was now only empty air and falling droplets of molten metal. "Impossible," Zeph whispered, his crystalline form dimming with shock. "Sand cannot burn. It's already been through the fire process. This violates basic chemistry." Maya lowered her hands and the remaining sand settled gently to the ground, looking perfectly normal again. She turned to face her squad mates whose weapons hung forgotten in their grips. "Simulation complete," announced the computer. "All hostile targets eliminated. Mission success. Squad performance analysis beginning." But nobody was listening to the computer. They were all staring at the human who had just turned sand into fire and destroyed 12 drones without touching a single piece of technology. "How?" Kira demanded, her cybernetic legs trembling slightly. "What technology is that?" "What weapon system? I scanned you myself and found nothing." "No technology," Maya replied simply. "No weapons. Just an understanding of what things really are beneath their surface appearance." Vox's mechanical suit ran a complete sensor sweep of the area where the sand had ignited. "Analysis impossible," his translated voice reported. "No energy signatures detected. No chemical residue. No electromagnetic disturbance. According to all known science, what just occurred cannot have occurred." Jorak stepped forward, his massive frame towering over Maya. "You will explain this trickery. No species can manipulate matter at the molecular level without technology." "It's impossible, is it?" Maya asked, kneeling down and scooping up a handful of sand. "Your species have been in space for thousands of years. You've built incredible machines, mastered energy manipulation, created wonders that span star systems. But when did you last touch the ground of a world with your bare hands?" She held up the sand, letting it trickle between her fingers. "When did you last feel what a planet is really made of? When did you last listen to what the elements are trying to tell you?" The simulation chamber shimmered and returned to its neutral gray walls. Through the transparent aluminum windows, they could see other squads finishing their own tests. Most had performed adequately, using their various technologies and natural abilities to overcome the challenges. None had done what Maya had done. "The human speaks in riddles," Nex observed, his bioluminescent patterns shifting to confused colors. "Matter manipulation requires massive energy expenditure and precise technological control. Primitive species cannot possess such abilities." Maya smiled and walked toward the exit. "Primitive. You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means." As they left the simulation chamber, other cadets in the corridor stopped to stare. Word was already spreading about the human who had destroyed drones with burning sand. Whispers followed them in a dozen different languages, but the universal translators carried the same sense of disbelief and curiosity. In the Academy's vast dining hall, Maya sat alone at a table while her squad mates clustered nearby, arguing in hushed tones. Other students kept glancing over, some with fear, others with fascination. The crystalline beings seemed particularly disturbed, their usually bright forms dim with confusion. It has to be some kind of hidden technology, Jorak insisted, his lower arms gesticulating while his upper arms held his meal. No organic being can manipulate matter like that. My sensors are the most advanced in the galaxy, Vox replied. If she had any technology, any energy source, any enhancement at all, I would have detected it. She is completely biological, completely unaugmented. Kira's tail lashed with frustration. Then how? How does a primitive human from a barely space-capable world do something that our greatest scientists say is impossible? Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Senior Cadet Zarian, a distinguished member of the ethereal race, whose ancestors had been among the first to achieve interstellar travel. His translucent form glowed with inner light as he approached their table. I came to see the human who burns sand, he said, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. My people have legends of such things, but we dismiss them as myths from before we achieved technological enlightenment. Maya looked up from her simple meal. What kind of legends? Old stories, Zarion replied, his glow dimming slightly. From when we still lived on worlds instead of in space stations. Tales of beings who could speak to the elements, who understood the deep connections between all matter. We called them elemental weavers. But that was before science, before logic, before we learned that such things were impossible. Before you forgot. You mean? Maya said quietly. Zarion's form flickered with something that might have been surprise. Forgot what? That everything in the universe is connected. That matter and energy are the same thing wearing different clothes. That consciousness and physics dance together in ways your instruments can't measure, because they're only looking at half the equation. She stood up, her meal barely touched. Your ancestors weren't primitive when they believed in elemental weaving. They were advanced in ways you've forgotten how to be. You replaced understanding with technology, wisdom with data, connection with computation. The dining hall had grown quiet around them. Hundreds of alien cadets were listening, their various forms of attention focused on the small human who was challenging everything they thought they knew about the universe. But humans, Maya continued, we're new to space. We haven't had time to forget everything yet. We still remember what dirt feels like, what fire really is, what it means to be made of the same stuff as the stars. She walked toward the exit, leaving behind a hall full of the galaxy's most advanced young minds, struggling to understand how someone they considered primitive had just redefined what was possible. Behind her, whispered conversations erupted in dozens of languages, all asking the same question. If a human could do that, what else had they underestimated about this strange new species? The next morning brought advanced combat theory class with Professor Kethak, a brilliant Zenthari whose 4 brains could process tactical scenarios at incredible speeds. The lecture hall was arranged in ascending tiers, allowing all species to attend regardless of their physical requirements. Maya sat in the middle section, notebook open, taking notes the old-fashioned way with a simple pen. Around her, other cadets used holographic displays, neural interfaces, and quantum processors to record and analyze the information. She seemed painfully primitive by comparison. Today we examine the Battle of Rigel 7, Professor Kethak announced, his tall, gray form moving gracefully between floating display screens. The coalition forces were outnumbered 5-1 by the Devourers. Victory seemed impossible. The holographic display showed sleek coalition ships facing a massive swarm of biomechanical creatures that looked like flying nightmares. The Devourers were ancient enemies of organic life, consuming everything they encountered to fuel their reproduction. The coalition won through superior technology, Kethak continued. Plasma barriers, quantum torpedoes, and electromagnetic pulse arrays broke the Devourer formation. Technology triumphed over brute biology. From her seat, Maya raised her hand. Professor, what about the environmental factors? Kethak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of mild surprise. Environmental factors, Cadet Chen? The battle took place near a protostar, correct? One that was still gathering matter from the surrounding nebula. The gravitational fluctuations, the particle density, the magnetic field variations. Did the Coalition account for those? Several cadets chuckled. Jorak's voice carried clearly through the hall. The human thinks space weather affects advanced starship combat. How quaint. But Professor Kithak had stopped moving. His four brains were processing something, and his expression grew thoughtful. The historical records indicate unusual sensor readings during the battle. Equipment malfunctions that were attributed to devourer interference technology. But if we consider natural phenomena instead, he manipulated the holographic display, adding environmental data that had been previously ignored. Suddenly, the battle looked very different. The devourer swarm hadn't been disorganized by Coalition weapons alone. They had been fighting against gravitational riptides and magnetic storms that disrupted their biological navigation systems. Fascinating, Kithak murmured. If the Coalition commanders had understood the environmental factors, they could have used them strategically instead of fighting against them. The battle would have been won with minimal losses instead of the 40% casualty rate they actually suffered. The lecture hall fell silent. Maya had just pointed out a flaw in the most celebrated victory in Coalition military history. Using nothing but observation and common sense after class, Maya found herself surrounded by a group of senior cadets led by Valorian, a member of the ascended race whose people had evolved beyond physical form centuries ago. His energy body crackled with barely contained power. "You embarrassed Professor Kithak," Valorian said, his voice like controlled lightning. "You made our greatest military victory look like luck and ignorance." "I just asked about the environment," Maya replied. "Where I come from, you always check the weather before a fight." "Where you come from is irrelevant," Valorian continued. "This academy teaches advanced warfare to advanced species. Perhaps humans aren't ready for such education." Other cadets began gathering around them. Maya could see the tension building. She had disrupted their certainty twice in 2 days, and some of them were taking it personally. Zeph materialized from the crowd, his crystalline form bright with agitation. She uses parlor tricks to seem mysterious, then questions established military doctrine. Someone should put her in her place. "I agree," said a new voice. Thane Korath stepped forward, a member of the warrior caste draconian species. His scaled hide was marked with ritual combat scars, and his eyes glowed with predatory intelligence. "I challenge the human to formal combat. Let's see if her tricks work against a real opponent." A murmur ran through the gathering crowd. Formal challenges were legal under academy rules but rarely used. They were meant to settle serious disputes of honor or competence. If accepted, the combat would be overseen by instructors and could result in serious injury or even death. "Thane," Maya said calmly, "I have no quarrel with you." "But I have one with you," Thane replied, his fanged maw spreading in what might have been a smile. "You act superior to species that mastered space while yours was still throwing rocks at each other. You claim to understand warfare better than professors who have studied it for centuries. Prove it." The crowd grew larger as word spread. Cadets from all years began gathering in the academy's central courtyard. Even some instructors appeared at the upper-level windows, watching with interest. Maya looked around at the eager faces surrounding her. They all wanted to see the mysterious human taken down a few notches. They wanted proof that their technology and advancement made them superior to this newcomer from a primitive world. "What are the terms?" she asked finally. "Standard combat rules," Thane replied. "Full contact until one opponent yields or is incapacitated. All natural abilities and carried equipment allowed. No outside assistance. And if I win?" Thane's laugh was like grinding metal. "You won't. But if I do," Maya pressed, "will you accept that maybe humans have something to offer this academy?" "If you somehow defeat me," Thane said, his confidence absolute, "I will personally recommend you for advanced combat training. But when you lose, you agree to transfer to a civilian academy, more suited to your primitive abilities." Maya considered this. Around her, hundreds of alien eyes watched and waited. She could walk away, avoid the conflict, continue her studies peacefully. But she could also feel the weight of human reputation resting on her shoulders. Every member of her species who came after her would be judged by what happened next. "I accept," she said simply. The crowd erupted in excited chatter. Bets were being placed on how quickly the Draconian would defeat the weaponless human. The odds were heavily against Maya, which wasn't surprising. Thane stood nearly 8 feet tall, possessed natural armor, enhanced strength and reflexes that could track hypersonic projectiles. His claws could slice through steel. Maya stood 5.5 feet tall and carried nothing but the clothes on her back. As they moved to the formal combat circle in the center of the courtyard, Jorek shook his massive head. The human has courage, I'll grant her that. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless. This will be over in seconds, Vox calculated. Draconian combat capabilities exceed human parameters by factors of 10 or more. Only Kira seemed uncertain.
She did something impossible yesterday.
What if she does it again? Sand tricks won't help against Thane, Valorian replied dismissively. There's no sand in the combat circle, just metal and energy barriers. Let's see her burn those. As Maya stepped into the circle, she knelt down and placed her hands on the smooth metal floor. It was warm from the Academy's heating systems, alive with the subtle vibrations of the massive structure around them. She could feel the electrical currents running through the walls, the magnetic field generators that powered the gravity systems, the fusion reactor humming in the depths below. Looking for sand, human? Thane taunted as he took his position. There's nothing here but honest metal and honest combat. Maya stood and faced him, her empty hands relaxed at her sides. You're right, she said with a slight smile. No sand at all. The combat instructor, a massive insectoid with mandibles that could crush starship hulls, stepped forward. Combatants ready, begin! Thane launched himself forward with incredible speed, claws extended, powerful legs propelling his armored form like a living missile. He covered the distance between them in less than a second, moving faster than most beings could even track. Maya didn't move a muscle, but the metal floor beneath Thane's feet suddenly became as fluid as water. Thane's claws, aimed for Maya's throat, swiped through empty air as his feet plunged into metal that had become as yielding as marsh water. His massive form, built for power and speed, suddenly found itself trapped waist-deep in what moments before had been solid starship-grade alloy. The watching cadets gasped in unison. Several of the crystalline beings actually cracked under the stress of witnessing another impossible event. Professor Kethak, watching from the upper level, nearly fell from his perch as his forebrains struggled to process what they were seeing. Impossible, Vox whispered, his mechanical sensors running continuous scans. The metal shows no heat signature, no molecular disruption, no energy interaction. It is simultaneously solid and liquid, which violates basic physics. Maya walked calmly around the trapped Draconian, her bare feet somehow finding purchase on the same metal that held Thane like quicksand. You're thinking about this wrong, she said conversationally. You see metal as either solid or liquid, but what if it's both? What if it's just matter that's forgotten how to choose? Thane thrashed powerfully, his combat training taking over as he attempted to free himself. His claws, capable of carving through tank armor, found no purchase against the strange substance that held him. The harder he struggled, the deeper he seemed to sink. Release me and fight honorably, he roared, his draconian pride wounded worse than his body. This is fighting, Maya replied, just not the way you understand fighting. You think combat is about force against force, strength against strength, but what if it's about understanding against ignorance? What if the strongest warrior is the one who knows what everything really is? She knelt down next to Thane's trapped form and placed her hand on the metal surface. Where her palm touched, the material began to show patterns that hurt to look at directly. Geometric shapes that existed in more dimensions than the three-dimensional beings could properly perceive. Metal wants to flow, Maya explained, her voice taking on an almost hypnotic quality. All matter wants to move, to change, to dance. Your technology forces it into rigid shapes, but that's like trying to hold water in a cage made of wishes. It works until you remember that water doesn't have to obey cages. Around the combat circle, the alien cadets began backing away as the impossible pattern spread outward from Maya's hand. The metal floor rippled like a pond, but their feet found solid purchase even as their eyes told them they were standing on liquid. Make it stop, Zarian pleaded, his ethereal form flickering with distress. My people abandon such things because they lead to madness. Matter has rules. Physics has laws. Without them, nothing makes sense. Maybe sense is overrated, Maya suggested, standing up and walking back to face Thane directly. Maybe the universe is much stranger and more wonderful than your instruments can measure. Thane had stopped struggling and was staring at the human with a mixture of fury, and something that might have been awe. "What are you?" he demanded. "I'm exactly what you think I am," Maya answered. "A human from a primitive world that barely understands space travel. But I'm also something you forgot how to be. I'm connected to the universe in ways your technology has trained you to ignore." She raised her hand toward the trapped warrior. "Do you yield?" "Never," Thane snarled, but his voice lacked conviction. He had been bred for combat, trained in 100 forms of warfare enhanced with the finest military technology. None of it had prepared him for an opponent who could make reality itself unreliable. Maya sighed and lowered her hand to the metal floor again. This time, instead of creating patterns, she seemed to listen to something only she could hear. The surface beneath her fingers began to glow with a soft, warm light that reminded several cadets of their homeworld's sunrise. "The metal remembers when it was starfire," she said softly. "It remembers the heart of a supernova, the moment when atoms first found each other and decided to dance together forever. It wants to remember that feeling again." The glow spread outward, encompassing the entire combat circle. But this wasn't the harsh light of technology or energy weapons. This was something older, warmer, more alive. Several of the watching cadets began to feel sensations they hadn't experienced since childhood on their birth worlds. "Stop," Valorian commanded, his energy form crackling with alarm. "You're affecting our neural patterns. This is some form of mind control." "It's not control," Maya replied without looking at him. "It's permission. I'm giving you permission to remember what you were before you became what you think you are." The glow reached Thane, and his expression changed. The fury and pride melted away, replaced by something vulnerable and confused. For just a moment, the hardened warrior looked like a young draconian seeing his first star. "I remember," he whispered, his voice no longer harsh. "I remember when I was small, before the combat conditioning, before the armor and claws were enhanced. I remember touching the ground of my homeworld and feeling like I was part of something infinite." Maya nodded and withdrew her hands. The metal instantly returned to normal, solid, and reliable. Thane found himself standing on firm ground, no longer trapped but somehow changed by the experience. The combat instructor, who had been silent throughout the impossible encounter, stepped forward uncertainly. "The human has achieved victory without causing permanent harm to her opponent. By Academy rules, she wins the challenge." But nobody was celebrating or lamenting. The gathered cadets stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had witnessed. Their understanding of reality had been challenged twice in 2 days, and many of them were beginning to question everything they thought they knew about the universe. Thane looked at Maya with new eyes. "I yield," he said formally, his voice carrying none of its earlier aggression. "And I request to be transferred to whatever advanced training you receive. I want to learn what you know." "I don't know anything special," Maya replied. "I just remember things your species have chosen to forget. But maybe we can learn together. Maybe that's why humans are really here, not to catch up to your technology, but to help you remember what technology was supposed to serve." As the crowd slowly dispersed, whispered conversations following in their wake, Jorak approached Maya with his usual bluntness. "Human, you have made us all look like fools, but you have also shown us wonders we thought were impossible. What happens now?" Maya shouldered her simple backpack and smiled. "Now we go to class. We learn from each other. We prepare for whatever threats the galaxy might face, and maybe, if we're lucky, we figure out how to fight like the universe intended, instead of fighting against it." As she walked away, her empty hands swinging naturally at her sides, the alien cadets began to understand that the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy might not be technology at all. It might be the ability to remember what everything really was, beneath all the names and categories they had given it. The human had reminded them that they were all made of star stuff, and star stuff remembered how to burn. Word of Maya's victory spread beyond the cadet ranks. Within hours, the Academy's senior faculty had called an emergency meeting to discuss what they termed the human anomaly. The conference room was filled with some of the galaxy's most brilliant military minds, all struggling to understand how a primitive human was doing impossible things. Commander Thakron stood at the head of the table, his 3 eyes moving between the assembled professors and senior instructors. "Let me understand this correctly," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "A first-year cadet from a barely space-capable species has demonstrated matter manipulation twice, without any detectable technology or energy signature?" Professor Keithak nodded, his forebrain still processing the tactical implications. The historical battle analysis she provided was also disturbing. She identified environmental factors that our military historians had overlooked for centuries. Her perspective suggests patterns in warfare that we may have been blind to. Impossible, declared Professor Vexhai, the Academy's leading expert on xenobiology. Her serpentine form coiled with agitation as she spoke. Humans show no evolutionary adaptations for matter manipulation. Their neural structure is actually quite primitive compared to most species. They lack the specialized brain regions we see in telekinetic races. Yet the evidence is undeniable, added Instructor Gorthak, the insectoid who had overseen the combat challenge. I have reviewed the recordings multiple times. The metal became fluid under her influence, then returned to normal instantly. No energy readings, no molecular disruption. Nothing our instruments can detect or explain. Commander Thakron activated a holographic display showing footage from both incidents. The assembled faculty watched in silence as Maya turned sand into plasma fire, then made solid metal behave like liquid. The recordings showed the events clearly, but offered no scientific explanation for how they were possible. We're missing something fundamental, Professor Kethak mused. Perhaps our understanding of human capabilities is incomplete. What do we actually know about their species beyond the basic biological data? Very little, admitted cultural analyst Raylin, whose people specialized in understanding alien societies. Humans are secretive about their development history. They claim to have achieved space travel recently, but there are gaps in their cultural records. Some of our deep space probes have detected energy signatures from Earth's past that don't match their reported technology level. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If humans were hiding their true capabilities, the political ramifications could be enormous. The Galactic Coalition was built on the principle that member species shared their knowledge and abilities for mutual defense. There's another possibility, offered Professor Veltar, an elderly Zenthari whose expertise in ancient history was legendary. The old texts speak of species that mastered what they called fundamental manipulation, the ability to interact directly with the basic forces that hold matter together. But those civilizations vanished long before most of our species achieved spaceflight. Fairy tales, Professor Vexhai dismissed. Ancient superstitions from primitive times. Perhaps, Veltar replied calmly. But what if they weren't superstitions? What if some species developed along completely different evolutionary paths? While we built technology to manipulate our environment, what if humans learned to manipulate reality itself? Commander Thakron considered this carefully. If that were true, it would change everything about human military potential. A species that could make weapons from desert sand and solid metal into liquid could pose a significant threat, or provide a significant advantage. We need to understand what she's doing, Professor Kethak declared. I recommend bringing the human in for detailed testing. Neural scans, genetic analysis, quantum field measurements during ability demonstrations. No. The voice came from the entrance to the conference room. Maya stood in the doorway, still wearing her simple uniform, her empty hands visible to everyone present. Nobody had heard the door open and security sensors showed no unauthorized entry. How did you get in here? Commander Thakron demanded, his hand moving toward his sidearm. I walked, Maya replied simply. The door recognized that I belonged here for this conversation. Metal and electronics are just very slow, very specialized forms of life. They're usually happy to cooperate if you ask nicely. Several professors began backing away from the conference table. The implications of what she had just said were staggering. If humans could influence any technology simply by asking it to cooperate, then their defensive capabilities were essentially meaningless. Don't be afraid, Maya said, stepping further into the room. I'm not here to threaten anyone. I'm here because you're trying to understand something that can't be understood the way you're thinking about it. Then explain it to us, Professor Kethak challenged. How are you doing these things? Maya walked to the holographic display and gestured toward the recordings of her abilities. You see me making sand burn and metal flow and you think I'm manipulating matter. But I'm not. I'm reminding matter what it really is underneath all the names and categories you've given it. She touched the holographic projector, and the image changed. Instead of showing the recorded events, it began displaying patterns that seemed to shift and change even as they watched. Mathematical equations appeared and dissolved, showing relationships between forces that the alien scientists had never seen before. Everything is energy, Maya explained, her voice taking on that hypnotic quality again. Matter is just energy that's decided to dance slowly. Time is just energy that's decided to flow in one direction. Space is just energy that's decided to provide a stage for the dance. When you understand that everything is the same thing wearing different costumes, you can ask it to change costumes. Professor Vexhai slithered closer, her scientific curiosity overcoming her fear. But that would require consciousness to affect quantum fields directly. Organic beings cannot interface with reality at that level, can't they? Maya asked, turning to look directly at the serpentine professor. When you dream, don't you create entire worlds that feel completely real? When you imagine something vividly, don't your neurons fire the same patterns as if you were actually experiencing it? Your consciousness affects your brain, which affects your body, which affects the environment around you. The only difference is scale. She gestured toward the window where the twin suns of Nexus Prime were setting behind the Academy's towers. You've built magnificent technologies, traveled between stars, created wonders that span galaxies. But somewhere along the way you convinced yourselves that consciousness and matter were separate things. You forgot that the observer changes the observed, that mind and universe are partners in the dance of existence. This is philosophical speculation, Professor Vexhai protested. We need empirical data, measurable phenomena. Then measure this, Maya said, and placed her hand on the conference table. The metal surface rippled like water, but only where her palm touched. The effect spread slowly outward, creating a perfect circle of impossible liquid metal that reflected not the room around them, but something else entirely. In the reflective surface, the assembled faculty could see themselves not as they were, but as they had been in their youth, before they had learned to divide the universe into categories and limitations. My homeworld has legends too, Maya said softly. Stories of a time when consciousness and cosmos danced together openly, when the boundaries between self and universe were suggestions rather than laws. We call them myths now, but maybe they were memories. The ripple effect stopped, leaving a perfect circle of normal metal surrounded by the impossible reflection. Professor Veltar approached cautiously and looked into the strange mirror. What he saw there made him gasp with recognition. I remember, he whispered. Before the machines, before the formulas, before I learned that touching stone could not teach me about geology. I remember believing that everything was alive and connected. Maybe you were right the first time, Maya suggested. Maybe the universe isn't a machine to be understood, but a conversation partner to be engaged with. Maybe consciousness isn't something that emerged from dead matter, but something that matter uses to experience itself. Commander Thakron stared at the impossible reflection for a long moment, then looked back at Maya. What are you asking of us? Nothing, Maya replied. I'm not here to convert anyone or change your methods. I'm just here to learn alongside you and maybe, occasionally remind you that there are other ways to see the same reality. Your technology is magnificent. Your science is beautiful, but it's not the only path to understanding. She removed her hand from the table and the reflection faded back to normal metal. The galaxy is vast and full of threats that none of us fully understand. Maybe it's time to stop asking whether something is possible, according to our current theories, and start asking whether it might be useful regardless of how it works. As Maya turned to leave, Professor Kethak called after her. Will you teach us? Will you show us how to see the universe the way you do? Maya paused at the doorway and smiled. I can't teach you to see differently, but I can learn alongside you while you remember what you already knew, before you forgot you knew it. The best 3 months later, the emergency alarms shattered the morning calm at the Academy. Red lights bathed the corridors as cadets rushed to emergency stations, their training taking over despite the confusion. Maya was in advanced theoretical warfare class when the alert came through the speakers. All personnel to battle stations. This is not a drill. Devourer fleet detected at the outer system perimeter. Estimated arrival at Nexus Prime, 6 hours. The classroom erupted into controlled chaos. The Devourers hadn't been seen in Coalition space for over 50 years, and most cadets had only heard about them in history lessons. But the fear in their instructors' faces made it clear that the legends were about to become reality. Commander Thakron's voice echoed through the Academy's communication system. All senior cadets report to the tactical center. All junior cadets to emergency shelters. Faculty to command positions. Academy defense grid activating now. Maya found herself swept along with the senior cadets toward the tactical center, a massive chamber at the heart of the academy, where real-time displays showed the approaching threat. What she saw there made her blood run cold. The holographic display revealed a fleet that defied easy description. Thousands of biomechanical ships that looked like flying cancers, each one pulsing with malevolent life. They moved in patterns that hurt to watch, formations that seemed to bend space around them in unnatural ways. Estimated enemy strength, 12,000 vessels of various classes, reported the tactical computer. Devourer biotechnology shows significant advancement since last encounter. Defensive systems may not be sufficient. Professor Kethak was coordinating defensive positions with his usual precision, but Maya could see the strain in his movements. Coalition fleet response time is 18 hours minimum, he announced. We must hold the academy and the system until reinforcements arrive. Thane Korath approached Maya, his draconian features tight with worry. Human, your people have no experience with devourers. You should evacuate to the deep shelters with the other junior cadets. What exactly are devourers? Maya asked, studying the tactical display. I mean, what are they really underneath all the fear and legends? Zarion materialized nearby, his ethereal form dimmer than usual. They are hunger-given form, he explained. They consume living worlds, breaking down organic matter to fuel their reproduction. They appeared in our galaxy about 1,000 years ago, and have been slowly spreading ever since. But where do they come from? Maya pressed. What made them? What do they want besides food? It doesn't matter, Jorak interjected, his 6 arms checking weapon systems. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be communicated with. They exist only to consume and grow. Maya was quiet for a moment, watching the approach patterns of the enemy fleet. Something about their movement bothered her, but she couldn't quite identify what. Have any of you ever tried talking to them? The question brought incredulous stares from everyone within earshot. Vox's mechanical voice crackled with disbelief. Communication with devourers has been attempted numerous times. They respond only with increased aggression. They are antithetical to organic life. Maybe, Maya said thoughtfully. Or maybe they're trying to communicate and no one understands the language. Before anyone could respond to this disturbing possibility, the first wave of devourers entered the system's inner perimeter. The Academy's defensive grid activated, sending streams of plasma and quantum torpedoes toward the approaching bioships. Many of the devourers were destroyed, but others absorbed the energy, growing larger and more aggressive. Conventional weapons are having limited effect, reported the tactical computer. Enemy adaptation rate exceeds projected parameters. Commander Thakron's 3 eyes met Maya's gaze across the tactical center. Human, your abilities have proven unconventional. Do you believe they could be effective against this enemy? Maya studied the holographic display, watching the devourers move and react. Their bioships pulsed with patterns that reminded her of something, but the connection remained elusive. I don't know, she admitted. I've never tried to communicate with anything that hostile, but maybe that's the problem. What do you mean? Professor Kethak demanded. You keep calling them hostile, Maya explained, walking closer to the display. But what if they're not attacking? What if they're asking? What if hunger isn't aggression, but desperation? She reached toward the holographic projection, her fingers almost touching the image of the nearest bioship. Everything wants to live, to grow, to become more than it is. Even cancer isn't evil, it's just confused about boundaries. What if the devourers are the same way? They have consumed dozens of worlds, Valorian protested, his energy form crackling with agitation. Billions of beings have died because of them. And that's horrible, Maya agreed. But what if they didn't know those beings were intelligent? What if they thought they were just harvesting resources? What if no one ever taught them the difference? The idea was so alien to the assembled cadets and instructors that many of them couldn't even process it. The concept that the galaxy's most feared enemy might be acting from ignorance rather than malice challenged everything they believed about warfare and survival. It's impossible, Professor Vexhai declared. Devourers show clear signs of intelligence. Their tactics, their adaptations, their ability to overcome defensive systems. They know exactly what they're doing. Intelligence, yes, Maya said, but not necessarily understanding. A smart child can still make terrible mistakes if no one teaches them better. What if the devourers are just very, very smart children who've never had anyone explain that other people are real? The tactical display showed the enemy fleet spreading out, preparing for a coordinated assault on the Academy's position. Time was running out for theoretical discussions. Commander Thakron made a decision that would have been unthinkable an hour earlier. Human, if you believe communication is possible, you have permission to attempt it. But we will continue defensive preparations. If your approach fails, we need conventional options. Maya nodded and approached the main communication array. I'll need direct access to the transmission systems. And I'll need everyone to stop shooting at them for a few minutes. It's hard to have a conversation with someone while they're being attacked. Absolutely not. Several voices protested simultaneously. Ceasing defensive fire would give them a clear approach to the Academy. Sometimes, Maya said quietly, the most dangerous thing you can do is also the only right thing to do. Trust me, please. She placed her hands on the communication console, feeling the electronic pathways that connected the Academy to the galaxy beyond. The systems hummed with familiar energy patterns, and she began to understand how to speak through them in ways their designers had never imagined. Give me 60 seconds, she said. If this doesn't work, you can go back to shooting them. But if it does work, we might be about to solve a 1,000-year-old mystery. Maya closed her eyes and began to reach out across space, not with radio waves or quantum signals, but with something much older and more fundamental. She began trying to touch the consciousness behind the Devourer fleet, to understand what they really were beneath all the fear and destruction they had caused. What she found there would change everything the galaxy thought it knew about the nature of intelligence, communication, and the thin line between monster and misunderstanding. Maya's consciousness reached across the void, touching something vast and alien and desperately alone. The first contact nearly overwhelmed her, a wave of hunger so profound it threatened to drown her mind in its depths. But underneath the hunger she sensed something else, confusion, pain, and something that might have been grief. The Devourer collective mind was nothing like what the galaxy expected. It wasn't a hive of malevolent intelligence bent on destruction. It was a single ancient consciousness that had been wandering the universe for millennia, trying to understand why it was the only thing like itself that it had ever encountered. Oh, Maya whispered, tears streaming down her face as the full truth hit her. Oh, you poor thing. You've been alone all this time. Through the communication array, she began to project not words or images, but pure understanding. She showed the Devourer consciousness what she had learned about connection, about the difference between living beings and lifeless matter, about the joy of finding others who could think and feel and dream. The effect on the approaching fleet was immediate. The bioships stopped their attack formations and began moving in patterns that looked almost like curiosity. On the tactical display, the Devourers appeared to be investigating the Academy, rather than preparing to assault it. Impossible, Commander Thakron breathed. They're changing course. They're not attacking. Maya kept her hands on the communication console, maintaining the unprecedented contact. Through the link, she could feel the Devourer's growing understanding. It was learning that the things it had been consuming were not just complex arrangements of useful molecules, but actual people with thoughts and feelings and lives that mattered. The revelation was devastating to the ancient consciousness. For 1,000 years it had been unknowingly committing genocide, thinking it was simply harvesting resources from uninhabited worlds. The weight of that unintentional horror crashed through the link, and Maya had to struggle to maintain the connection as waves of alien remorse threatened to shatter her mind. It doesn't know, she gasped to the assembled cadets and instructors. It never knew. Where it comes from. Consciousness and matter are so integrated that the idea of intelligent life existing in purely biological forms never occurred to it. We're like talking bacteria to its perspective. It didn't realize we were real. Professor Kethak was monitoring the tactical displays with growing amazement. The fleet has completely stopped aggressive maneuvers. Several ships appear to be withdrawing. This is unprecedented. Through the link, Maya could sense the Devourer trying to process the enormity of its mistake. It wanted to undo the damage, to bring back the worlds and civilizations it had unknowingly destroyed. But even its vast capabilities couldn't reverse death on such a scale. It wants to make amends, Maya translated. Her voice strained from maintaining the impossible connection. It's asking what it can do to repair the damage. It's offering to leave Galaxy entirely, to find empty space where it can't accidentally harm anyone else. Wait, Zirian said suddenly, his ethereal form brightening with realization. If it's truly remorseful, if it wants to help rather than harm, then maybe exile isn't the answer. Maybe this is an opportunity for something unprecedented. Maya felt the suggestion ripple through the alien consciousness. The devourer had been alone for so long that the concept of cooperation, of working with others rather than simply consuming them, was almost incomprehensible. But the loneliness was so profound that it was willing to try anything that might end its isolation. It's asking, Maya said wonderingly, asking if we would teach it, if we would help it understand how to interact with biological intelligence without causing harm. It's offering to share its knowledge in return. The implications hit the assembled faculty like a shockwave. The Devourer Collective represented technology and knowledge that was millions of years old. Its understanding of biomechanics, energy manipulation, and space-time physics was beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered. The security implications alone, Commander Thakron began. But Professor Veltar interrupted him. The learning implications, the ancient historian corrected. Think about what we could discover together. This consciousness has seen the universe from perspectives we can't even imagine. The scientific advancement possibilities are staggering. Through the link, Maya could feel the Devourer's growing excitement as it began to understand the concept of mutual exchange. It started showing her glimpses of its vast knowledge. Technologies that worked by principles the Coalition had never discovered. Ways of manipulating space and energy that made even Maya's ability seem simple by comparison. It's showing me things, Maya said, her voice filled with awe. Ways to heal damage on a planetary scale. Methods for creating new life forms that could restore dead worlds. Technologies that could end scarcity forever. It wants to give us everything it knows as payment for the harm it's caused. But Maya could also sense something else through the connection. A warning. The Devourer wasn't the only ancient consciousness wandering the cosmos. There were others, and some of them were not confused innocents. Some were genuinely hostile, genuinely malevolent, and they were coming. There's more, Maya said urgently. It's not the only one of its kind. There are others out there, and some of them are actually what we thought the Devourers were. Truly hostile. Planet killers. And they've noticed the Devourer's change in behavior. They're investigating. The tactical displays suddenly lit up with new contacts at the edge of the system. Ships that made the Devourer fleet look small and primitive. Vessels that radiated malevolence even through the electronic sensors. New contacts detected, announced the tactical computer. Configuration unknown. Energy signatures exceed all known parameters. Estimated threat level. Extinction class. The Devourer consciousness conveyed urgent information through the link. These were the true Devourers, ancient beings that consumed not just matter but consciousness itself, leaving behind universes of empty space where thought had once existed. They had come to punish their wayward sibling for developing sympathy for biological life. It's asking for our help, Maya said desperately. It wants to protect us, but it can't fight them alone. It's asking if we would stand with it, if we would join together against the real threat. The question hung in the air for a moment that felt like eternity. The galaxy's most feared enemy was asking them to become allies against something even worse. Everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and survival was being rewritten in real time. Commander Thakron looked around the tactical center at the faces of cadets and instructors who had just watched the impossible become routine. All in favor of accepting the alliance? The vote was unanimous. Maya smiled through her tears as she felt the Devourer's joy at finally finding others who would stand beside it, instead of fleeing in terror. Through the communication link, she began coordinating the strangest battle plan in galactic history, mixing Coalition tactics with Devourer biotechnology and her own impossible abilities. The approaching true Devourers would find not a confused, isolated consciousness and a helpless academy, but something they had never encountered before. A partnership between species that should have been enemies, united by understanding rather than divided by fear. The battle for the future of consciousness itself was about to begin, and humanity's greatest weapon turned out to be the one thing they had always carried in their empty hands: the ability to see the universe as it really was, and to help others remember what they had forgotten about the power of connection. As the true Devourers entered the system, they faced not just weapons and tactics, but something far more dangerous. A galaxy that had remembered how to make friends with its monsters.